Welcome to Chapter 11 of our Civil War unit, Tactics and Advances. Winfield Scott. He lived from 1786 until 1866. He had several nicknames including Old Fuss and Feathers and Grand Old Man of the Army. In 1808 he was commissioned as a captain in the light artillery. He was then promoted to lieutenant colonel, then to colonel, to brigadier general, and then to major general during the War of 1812. He was a commanding general during the Mexican-American War, but lost the position to Zachary Taylor. He ran as the Whig candidate for president in 1852, but lost to Franklin Pierce. In 1861, with the beginning of the Civil War, because of his age and health problems, Scott hoped to pass power to Robert E. Lee, but Virginia seceded and Lee joined the Confederacy with them. After several failures, Scott resigned and George McClellan took his place. The Scott Plan. Scott hoped to use his military experience to create a winning strategy. Scott said the South was made up of three regions separated by the Mississippi River and the Appalachian Mountains. Step 1 was, if the Mississippi River is taken, then Louisiana, Arkansas, and Texas are eliminated from the war. Step 2. A blockade can be set up to prevent ships from entering or leaving the South's ports, preventing them from trading and resupplying. Finally, Step 3. The South will weaken because they won't be able to sell cotton to Europe and buy supplies, and the North can use its resources and manpower to overwhelm them. Below is a political cartoon depicting the Scott Plan as a ginormous snake wrapping around the South. Often, the Scott Plan was nicknamed the Anaconda Plan because he hoped to squeeze the will to fight out of the South. The effects of the blockade. There were many critics of Scott's plan, saying that it would take too long and that it wasn't aggressive enough. It was nicknamed the Anaconda Plan because it would slowly squeeze the life out of the South. President Lincoln agreed that it was a sound plan, and the day after Fort Sumter surrendered, a naval blockade was ordered. The blockade was not successful at first because the Union only had 33 ships to cover 3,500 miles of shoreline. 9 out of 10 Confederate ships that tried to sail out for trade were successful. By 1862, the blockade became more effective. This is because the North's factories were able to increase the size of the Navy by producing 700 new warships. The Merrimac. In 1854, the USS Merrimac was built in Boston Navy Yard and was launched later the following year. The Merrimac was a naval steam frigate, which had both sails and a steam engine, used in sea battles. In 1861, the Gosport Navy Yard in Virginia was burnt, and the Merrimac was sunk. The remains were salvaged by the Confederacy, and the lower hull and engine were still intact. The ship's hull was cut down and rebuilt to be sleeker and lower to the sea. The ship was then covered in 4-inch thick iron plating. Once the changes were made, the Merrimac was renamed the CSS Virginia. Below is an overview of the details of the CSS Virginia. Take a moment and pause the video and look at the different aspects of this ship. The Monitor. When news spread that the South was reconstructing the USS Merrimac as an ironclad, they hurried to make one of their own. Plans for an American ironclad dated back to 1854, but the plans were never completed because of the untimely death of its designer. Under the direction of engineer John Erickson, the USS Monitor was completed in 101 days in Brooklyn. The Monitor was designed to be a small target with most of its hull barely above sea level. Its one distinct feature was its central turret that could rotate 360 degrees, was armed with 2 cannons, and covered in 8 inches of iron plating. Below is an overview of the details of the USS Monitor. Take a moment to pause the video and look over the details of this ship. Naval warfare begins. Ironclads dated back to the 1850s when France used floating ironclad batteries in the Crimean War. The armored frigate Glore was later produced in 1859, and the English responded with the HMS Warrior. The first American ironclad battle began on March 8, 1862 in Hampton Roads, Virginia. On the first day, the CSS Virginia laid waste to Union sailing ships. The USS Monitor arrived the following day to defend the remaining ships. The Monitor battled the Virginia for over 4 hours, with neither side gaining a decisive edge over the other. Turn to your primary documents packet to read more about this battle in detail. David Farragut. He lived from 1801 until 1870. He began his naval career as a midshipman at the age of 9. Farragut served aboard the USS Essex during the War of 1812 at the age of 12. In the 1820s, Farragut was promoted to lieutenant and commanded the USS Ferret against the West Indies pirates. He also served as a commander during the Mexican-American War. Farragut viewed secession as treason, and right before the Southern states seceded, he moved his family from Virginia to New York. Early on during the war, Farragut was given command of the USS Hartford and the West Gulf Blockading Squadron. Mississippi River ports. Farragut took this opportunity to carry out the first phase of Scott's plan, cutting off Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana. Using his fleet of 23 blockading ships, Farragut sailed up the Mississippi River to New Orleans, capturing it in short time. This gutsy move helped Farragut get promoted to the position of Rear Admiral, and by 1866 he would become Vice Admiral and then finally Admiral, the highest rank in the Navy. While the South still controlled ports including Vicksburg, Mississippi, the North had taken control of a majority of the Mississippi River. Vicksburg prevented Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana from being completely cut off, helping the Confederacy survive. Summary. The Navy was essential to success during the Civil War. The Union tried to blockade the South and cut it off from the Mississippi using the Scott Plan. The Civil War also marked the first battle between two ironclad warships. Please make sure to copy down the summary and make sure you have all the terms in your notes.